Welcome back to the Garlic Marketing Show. We're talking more about stories and strategies, and we're working with agencies in this special series and their success stories, featuring the success stories, the real life success stories of people doing it right now for their clients and seeing what's happening. And today we're going to talk about creative strategies. We're going to talk about an amazing creative strategy for a big radio network that was both unique in the creative and the delivery of it to get media sponsors. I've got Alfonso Cuesta of Salta with Us agency. Alfonso, thank you so much for being on the show.
My pleasure, Ian. Thanks a lot for having me.
And of course, this is brought to you by videocasestory.com. One of the best ways to stay in front of your clients, whether you're an agency or a creative firm or anyone else, is with Video Case Stories. Video Case Stories should be following people around using sales and your marketing and your operations. Go to videocasestory.com to learn about 50 ways to use Video Case Stories. All right, Alfonso, I'm super excited. We were talking before the show about this really cool story that you worked with NPR to help them launch their podcast, help them get sponsors on their podcast, which is, it's a tough thing to do, and you've got a unique way of doing it. And interesting way that you're looking at creative strategy right now in the second part of the show. But Alfonso, before we get started, tell us a little bit about Salta with Us.
Oh boy. So Salta with Us, I've referred through time, we've referred to it in many different ways. The smallest international advertising agency in the world. You're going to need an agency like this. It's only an agency, but I like it. And lately we're referring to ourselves as a mission statement, a creativity first agency. We do creative work no matter the channel. We're totally agnostic if it's digital, mobile, traditional, whatever it might be. So we are a creative first agency. And then our motto lately is good shit for good people, meaning we only work for brands and organizations that are either actively doing good for the world, or at the very least, not making it a worse place. So that's what we stand for. We're an agency with soul and purpose.
I love it. I mean, I think that's important to have that. I mean, not everyone's going to be that, but if you are, stand up for it. Because I think there's so many agencies out there that feel that way, but then we'll take whatever business that comes through the door.
And to be honest, I don't judge. It's hard sometimes out here, and I started my days working for I'm not going to say the name of the company, but it's red and they do soda. And they're not the best thing in the world, but I had to make a living, and I wasn't even aware of these things. But anyway, so I don't judge at all, but that's in my stories and things. That's what I decided to do.
But it's not judging, but when you stick to it, I mean, that's hard work. It's hard work to stick to something like that. And speaking of working with great companies, I'm a big fan of NPR. I love it. I love the journalism. I love the stories that they have. They tell amazing stories on there, and the science stuff. I geek out. But you helped them with back in the podcast days, right? When they were starting their podcast. Tell me a little bit about that.
So we had only launched Salta like a year before, and we were through networking. I got to NPR. I didn't know anybody. I just got introduced, and one of our first briefs was for this launch they were doing. They were producing a lot of podcasts. They were cementing their reputation as producers of great podcast content in the nation, and obviously they needed advertisers to sponsor those spaces. So to put an example, they needed Ford Motor to be part of Invisibilia or Serial or whatever the podcast of the time was. And in order to find those sponsors, they had what I consider to this day one of the most brilliant media buying strategies that I've seen. However, the format was very challenging, and obviously I'll talk about that more. So the challenge was that the media format they went for was elevators. And we all know what happens when you get into an elevator. You don't want to necessarily look around. You basically put your head down on your phone and you do that for the next minute or so. We look into Twitter, Instagram, whatever. So you're not really paying attention. And NPR had bought a massive buy of media in elevators. However, they were very smart and they bought them in buildings across New York, LA, and Chicago, where advertising agencies and big media agencies had their offices. So whenever, the director, the marketing director of Levi or any other big brand would go to visit Ogilvy, they would be in the elevator, and the thinking was they would be exposed to whatever we put on the screen. And knowing how tough the format was, all we could think of was, okay, we need something very hard to look at, or very, very hard to look at, but at the same time, very hard not to look at, something very powerfully attention grabbing. So we brainstormed and we landed on this idea that from a conceptual standpoint, we have your ears, or we have their ears, basically telling our audience, hey, NPR has the ears of the nation. This was based on a study that proved that X amount of listeners reacted in a positive way to stuff they listened on NPR, or they acted on their messaging. They had positive views of the brands that had previously been advertised on NPR. So we could literally say NPR has their ears. The problem is that we needed people to look at our piece of advertising, and that was challenging too. So what we decided to do was basically have a fishbowl full of ears floating. You can look at it on our website. It's disgusting to look at, but the same
you know what? We're gonna look at it right now.
Oh, that's how you roll, Ian.
If can you see my screen?
It says, oh yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah. If you're listening to this on the podcast, you're gonna have to go watch it on YouTube, or go to saltawithus.com and check out the portfolio. But yeah, this is it's a crazy one. I'm not going to play it too much because Zoom, but I'm going to click through it. So keep telling us about this. I love it.
Yeah. So you had the ears, and then you had those facts that I was referring to. It's the #1 podcast in the nation, and then we threw. Obviously, we did it on 3D, but I always joke that we trained the ears to listen, because really they were not listening, and we taught them how to swim. But we threw that earpiece in the water that obviously attracted all the ears, and
it's so cool.
One could say we have their ears. So that was the piece of creative. Obviously, it's B2B. It was very well produced. It could have been B2C. It also, and I haven't told you this before, Ian, they put it on Adweek, which is another great format for this. It was a rich media banner, and it worked very well. Obviously, unlike with business to consumer, you don't need hundreds of thousands of clients to kind of consume it or fall for it.
No.
It had great results, and it's a campaign that we love. I always say I wish we had almost also be responsible for the media placement strategy, because it was really smart. But that's something NPR came up with. What we came up with was the creative, which I think to this day, to me, is this piece is one that demonstrates that creativity is kind of in a very cluttered environment that we have. Creativity is the way to actually stand out and get your message noticed. So
yeah, and what I love about this is there's a lot of nuance here. But first of all, the fundamentals are there. You all knew exactly who your audience was. You knew exactly what you want them to do, what they want them to pay attention to. Very specifically, you knew the audience and what you want to pay attention to. So you figured out where they were, because a lot of people might have just gone straight to YouTube with something like this, or, straight to, Facebook ads, which would have been a much more, spray and pray methodology. Not that that's not good, but when you're talking about these people, you figured out where they were, or, NPR did, and then created the creative, knowing what would grab their attention, or guessing what would grab their attention. And I think there was everyone didn't like this right away, right?
Yeah, that's another part of the story that I really I really love. And by the way, two things. You're absolutely right about, you could have done Facebook, you could have done with a certain degree of success, YouTube pre-roll too, and targeted. But I think it was important how contextual it was, because you were grabbing people's attention as they walked in the agency, where they were going to talk about campaigns. Like, I think you had people in the right mindset, which I think is important. And again, as good as social media is, you don't necessarily always get people in that mindset. And one other portion of this campaign that probably, all of our campaigns are like our kids, especially the ones we put in the portfolio. We don't put everything up there, but this one is particularly dear to me because it was about to die in the meeting room. And there was one person who believed in it very strongly on the client side. Everybody liked it. Everybody understood that it was very creative. Everybody saw the merit. But it's scary when you're NPR, you're kind of serious, and you don't want to present yourself necessarily with severe ears from a head, just looking very weird floating. So we were able to turn it around. This person from the client was a huge advocate, and he just said, look, if we don't do it now, we're never going to do it. Sometimes in these big organizations, the idea is we can do it the next time when we prove that the concept kind of works. And he was like, look, this is what catches people's attention, especially in an elevator. And if we either do it now or we never do it. One thing that I did to actually sell this, and I always do it whenever we're facing challenging formats, is actually bring the click-through ratio opening rate, like how many people click. And when you tell clients, listen, you're gonna pay this amount of money, out of every 1,000, half a woman is gonna click on it, then they are a little bit more open to start listening about more radical creativity, because they understand that, the numbers game, you're going to have thousands of impressions, but if you don't have good creative, the impact is just very marginal. So anyway, using those figures,
I love it.
We were able to sell it, and we had the ears swim forever to this day, at least in our website.
No, and like you said, I think, framing it at the exact moment when someone's ready is important. Understanding that moment when someone's thinking about that thing, because we buy, I always say, it's studies. We don't buy because of who we are, because we buy because of the situations. And you would have to shown these to these people maybe 10 times versus this one time when they're just ready to buy. And while it's out of the box and a complete pattern interrupt, it completely makes sense too. So that's what I love about this ad. This is really, really good. And obviously it worked, and that's fantastic. And congratulations. So cool. This has been fantastic. I think that's an incredible strategy. Your story about NPR was great. So tell us a little bit about how, where to find both. Obviously, Salta with Us. We'll put a link. It's Salta with Us. I'm sure there's not a whole lot of them. But what's the best way to follow you, Alfonso? Best way to get to know what you're up to?
So saltawithus.com for sure. Then we're very active on Instagram. We are starting to be very active on the NFT space. If that interests anybody here, they should go to saltawithus.com/NFT_central. You can also get there just through our website. Twitter, I'm mildly active. LinkedIn, any time of the day. And then my email, alfonso@saltawithus.com.
Awesome.
And Facebook too, I guess. We bag them up.
Everywhere.
Everywhere, exactly. On every social platform, almost every social platform, that's where we are, and obviously on the web.
Fantastic. Well, Alfonso, thank you so much for being on this special edition of the Garlic Marketing Show.
Ian, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm incredibly appreciative of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you all for taking us on your journey. It's been On Garlic and the Garlic Marketing Show.
Thank you, Ian.